Today I am reviewing the BenQ 4K HDR short throw projector. If at any time you'd like to explore this product for yourself and grab it at a great price, be sure to check the links below the video. If you have ever tried to turn a small spare bedroom or a cramped apartment living room into a home theater, you know the struggle of trying to get a decent picture size without the projector sitting halfway across the house. I spent the last 3 weeks living with the BenQ TK710STi, and I have some very specific thoughts on whether this short throw laser setup is actually the miracle solution for tight spaces that it claims to be. There's a lot to like here, but there are also a few quirks that might frustrate you if you do not know exactly what you're getting into. If you want to check the current pricing or see the full specs for yourself, I have included links below the video that will take you straight to the product page. Let's start with the most impressive part of this unit, which is the brightness. Usually when you talk about projectors, you have to talk about light control. You have to talk about blackout curtains, dimmers, and watching movies only after the sun goes down. With the TK710STi, that is not entirely the case. This thing pushes 3,200 ANSI lumens, which is legitimately bright. I tested this in my living room during the afternoon with the blinds open, and while it obviously does not look like a high-end OLED television, it is perfectly watchable. You can actually play a game or watch a sports broadcast without feeling like you're sitting in a cave. That laser light source is doing some heavy lifting here. It feels punchy, and the colors do not wash out as aggressively as they do on cheaper, lamp-based projectors. If you are looking for something that can double as a daytime TV replacement, this is one of the few projectors I have tested that actually pulls that off reasonably well. The short throw capability is the real reason you are buying this specific model. I set this up on a low-profile media console just a few feet from my wall, and I was getting a massive, immersive image. This is a game changer for anyone who does not want to deal with mounting a projector on the ceiling or running long HDMI cables across the floor. You just put it on your existing stand, aim it, and you're good to go. However, there is a trade-off with short-throw optics that you need to be aware of. The focus uniformity on this unit was mostly solid, but if you look at the extreme corners of the screen, you might notice a tiny bit of softness compared to the center. It is not something you will notice during an action movie or a fast-paced game, but if you are using this to read text on a computer or browse spreadsheets, you'll see it. It is a common characteristic of this lens type, but it is worth noting if you are a perfectionist. Now, let's talk about the image quality. It is a 4K projector, and it handles detail quite well. The 95% Rec. .709 color coverage means that skin tones look natural and the overall color science feels very balanced right out of the box. BenQ has a history of leaning toward a more cinematic, accurate look rather than the oversaturated, neon-looking colors you get on some budget models. If you're a fan of that filmic look, you will appreciate this. HDR performance is decent, though like almost every projector in this price bracket, it struggles with deep blacks. You are not going to get that infinite contrast you get on an OLED screen. In dark scenes, the blacks look more like a dark charcoal gray. That is just the physics of projection, but I found that the contrast enhancement features help bridge that gap enough to keep the image from looking flat. For the gamers out there, this is where the TK710STi really tries to distinguish itself. BenQ is marketing this as a serious gaming machine, and the specs back it up. I hooked up my console and ran a few rounds of a competitive shooter, and the 4 milliseconds response time at 1080p 240Hz is genuinely impressive. I did not feel any perceptible lag. If you are playing games where timing is everything, you are not going to be held back by this projector. It feels responsive, snappy, and smooth. Switching between a movie mode and a game mode is straightforward, and the projector handles the handshake between devices without much fuss. If you want to see how this compares to other gaming-focused projectors, you can find the links to the current listings below this video. The built-in Android TV interface is a massive convenience factor, but it is also a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, having Google-certified Android TV built right into the projector means you do not have to mess around with an external streaming stick or clutter up your HDMI ports with extra hardware. The interface is snappy, and it supports all the major apps you would expect. However, streaming platforms can be fickle with projector certifications. Most of the content looks great, but sometimes the menu navigation can feel just a hair slower than a dedicated high-end streaming box like an Apple TV or a NVIDIA Shield. It is perfectly functional for 95% of users, but if you are a power user, you might eventually decide to plug in your own device anyway. Thankfully, you have the ports to do that. One thing that surprised me was the fan noise. Even with the laser light source pushing out that much brightness, the cooling system is surprisingly quiet. It is not silent, obviously, because it has to move air, but the fan pitch is low and consistent. It does not have that annoying high-frequency whine that makes you want to turn the volume up just to drown it out. If you are sitting within a few feet of the unit, you'll hear it during quiet scenes, but once you have a decent soundbar or home theater system running, it completely disappears into the background. Speaking of sound, the internal speaker is usable in a pinch, but please do yourself a favor and connect an external audio system. It is fine for a quick YouTube video, but it lacks the depth and clarity you need for a proper movie night. Regarding the setup, the lens shift and keystone correction tools are helpful, but they are not a substitute for proper placement. You really want to get this thing positioned as squarely as possible to avoid using digital keystone correction, because that always degrades the image quality. The short throw nature makes it a little sensitive to the surface you place it on, so make sure your media console is perfectly level. If the projector is tilted even a few degrees, you'll be fighting with the geometry settings for an hour. It is a one-time setup process, so take the time to do it right, and you will be rewarded with a much sharper image. Who is this projector actually for? I think it is the perfect fit for the person who wants a massive screen experience in a living room or a bedroom but doesn't have the space for a traditional long throw setup. It is for the gamer who wants to play on a 100-inch screen without feeling like their inputs are falling behind the action. It is also for the person who wants a low-maintenance, reliable daily driver. The laser light source means you don't have to worry about the bulb dimming after a few hundred hours or needing to buy expensive replacements. It is a set-and-forget-it piece of hardware that is designed to last for years. On the flip side, who should avoid this? If you are a dedicated home theater enthusiast who demands perfect black levels and infinite contrast, you are probably going to be disappointed by the inherent limitations of a DLP projector. You might be better off looking at a high-end OLED TV or a much more expensive, dedicated laser cinema projector with a specialized screen. Also, if you are strictly an office user looking for a projector for presentations, this might be overkill. The color accuracy is tuned for entertainment, not for static charts and spreadsheets. While it will work, there are cheaper, specialized office projectors that would serve that purpose better. Value-wise, the TK710STi sits in an interesting spot. It isn't cheap, but you are paying for the combination of short-throw optics, high brightness, and gaming responsiveness. When you add up the cost of a high-quality TV of this size, if you could even find one, the projector actually starts to look like a bargain. You are getting a massive image, and that experience is hard to put a price on. If you're considering pulling the trigger, I recommend checking the links below to see the latest prices and perhaps catching a sale or a bundle offer. One final thought on the durability. BenQ has a good reputation and the build quality feels solid. It doesn't feel like a flimsy piece of plastic. It has a bit of weight to it, which usually indicates decent internal components and cooling. I haven't had any issues with the laser flickering or the firmware crashing during my time with it. It feels like a mature product. I think the biggest disappointment for some users might be the lack of deep, inky blacks that you get from high-end displays, but that is a compromise you make for the scale of a projector. If you go into this understanding that you are trading absolute contrast for a massive, cinematic experience that works in ambient light, you're going to be very happy. It is a fun, practical, and highly capable machine that does exactly what it promises on the box. If you have been on the fence about switching from a TV to a projector for your main media setup, this is a very strong contender that removes many of the traditional barriers to entry. It makes the big screen lifestyle feel attainable, and that is a massive win in my book. Make sure to check the links below if you want to dig deeper into the specs or see what others are saying in the reviews. And as always, think about your specific room layout before you commit to a short throw projector to make sure you have the right surface distance. This is a solid piece of tech that I expect will keep a lot of people very entertained for a long time.